Today's webinar is sponsored by WorkSafe BC and presented in partnership with Excellence in Manufacturing Consortium and Technical Safety BC. This topic is really important for many of our members because research shows that 40% of reported ammonia incidents happen in refrigeration systems for food storage or warehousing. So today we'll look at failure scenarios that have led to ammonia leaks and how you can limit your risk. Please welcome our presenters today, Technical Safety BC Leader of Safety System Risk, Jackie Yip, Risk Management Specialist, Annie Wang, and Senior Technical Advisor, Hamid Azarnoush. Welcome.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer, for the intro.
Welcome.
Let me put up our slides quickly. Great. We're really excited to have this opportunity to share our work in this space and also to really use this opportunity to get your feedback on some of the things that we hope to do coming up to help mitigate and manage this risk of ammonia leak. I will go ahead if everyone can see the slide deck. But before we start on our presentation, we actually wanted to, for those who are not familiar with who Technical Safety BC is and what we do, we have a quick intro video that we wanted to show.
Too often about the technologies we use and depend on every day. They get us from one place to another, make our lives convenient, comfortable, and exciting. But behind each technology, a dedicated group of experts ensures they're installed, maintained, and operated safely. Technical Safety BC is a self-funded organization that works with these experts and oversees the safety of technical systems and equipment across the province. But we can't do it alone. We work with our clients and partners to make sure safety initiatives make sense for everyone. Building your dream home? We're here to help you prioritize your family's safety. Looking to become certified in your trade? We can guide you through the steps. See a worrying incident or hazard? Report it, and let us help British Columbians learn from it so we can prevent similar incidents in the future. We're safer together. Do your part by getting involved and partnering with us to build a safer BC. Visit technicalsafetybc.ca to learn more.
So I guess what we actually do a lot of the times is we regulate across 7 different technologies in BC, but the technology that brought us here today is the refrigeration technology. So for the session today, we have quite a bit that we wanted to share with you. Firstly, we have recently completed a risk analysis on ammonia leak, where we looked at incidents across the whole province. And so we want to share the results with you, where the results has really been serving as the basis for us to think of what we need to do to further reduce this risk and how we can manage it. So today we wanted to bring some initial ideas of risk treatment actions that TSBC hope to implement to get your feedback really as an opportunity to to sanity check these ideas, but also to have some of your input from your sector to make it more meaningful. And then we will have some time for Q&A at the end. So in a very high level, our risk management process for ammonia risk, we start off with a risk analysis to really help us understand this risk a bit more. So this broadly speaking involves first characterizing the risk. So we want to understand what is the hazard, what are the causal pathways of ammonia leak, what is the exposure, as in who and what is exposed to this hazard, and what are the consequences. And then we want to also identify risk patterns. That's really to help us understand, are there predominant ways in which ammonia leak tends to happen in BC? And are they different in different sectors, or are they pretty similar? What are those similar patterns, so that can help guide us in our risk treatment actions to where to target and how to make things more meaningful for different sectors. So we will go through the risk analysis results, and then after that, we will use the risk analysis findings to help guide our risk treatment planning, as I mentioned. But once we've come up with some of those ideas, we really want to speak to the industry, the stakeholders, to verify to see if they are valid options. How can we make it more feasible and relevant to the different sectors, even though everyone has ammonia refrigeration system across, but they might be using it in very different ways, or they might face very different challenges in maintaining them or operating them, or and also their lifespan and life cycles could be very different too. So we'll jump right in. But before we go into the analysis, we also just wanted to say that to us, risk is a function of three different things. It is a function of the hazard, which is often used interchangeably with risk. People often say this, the risk of that, but the hazard of this, almost as if they're the same thing. But for us, risk is really a function of the hazard, which is the source of the harm. What are the causes of this hazard? And then also a function of the exposure, who and what, to what extent people or assets are exposed to this hazard, and also the consequence, which is the effect of being exposed to this hazard. So we want to really better understand ammonia leak in terms of these three components. So our risk analysis approach, broadly speaking, as I mentioned, has two components. The first step is really to characterize these three things in every single ammonia incident that has been reported to us in the province. So we looked at historical ammonia incidents from the period 2008 to 2024. And for each incident, we wanted to find out what is the, in terms of hazard, what is the failure pathway? What is the sequence of things that has led to the ammonia leak? What type of system it involved, and what concentration or leak location was, if available. And then also in terms of exposure, we wanted to know for that incident what kind of premise it was at, what was that premise used for, where's the geographic region, employment size of the business, to give us a sense of roughly how many people could have been exposed to that hazard. And then lastly, consequence, how many injuries, fatalities, or asset damage has resulted from the incident. So we did that for all the incidents in this period of time. Once we've done that, then the next step was we have grouped these incidents in terms of where they were happening, such that it will allow us to kind of start to see where are the similarities in across these different sectors, but also what are the differences. As I mentioned, they might all have ammonia refrigeration systems, but they might be using them in very different contexts, and operations could be very different too. So ultimately, this allows us to better understand how ammonia incidents happen in these different sectors to come up with more meaningful and tailored risk treatment actions for these different sectors. So I will pass it to Annie to speak to our risk analysis results. I'm going to shift over to this side and
hi everyone. Thank you, Jackie. So to begin with, as Jackie mentioned, we had to map each of our incidents to an ammonia fault tree. This fault tree was developed by Technical Safety BC in fall of 2025 by internal stakeholders, and then shared more broadly with external stakeholders in order to gain their input, revise the document, and come to our final document. Jackie will now open up a copy of our fault tree, and I will walk you through it, as I know some of you may not be familiar with how to read a fault tree. So this is what the fault tree looks like. So as you can see, the text is rather small, but we read a fault tree from right to left, starting with our event. And in this case, our undesirable event is the uncontrolled release of ammonia. One column over, you will see the basic condition, and that is the main cause of the event. And this describes, generally speaking, why the event occurred. So we found 5 basic conditions that are listed below. You can see the top 3 here on your screen. But the main one we're going to use to exemplify how to read the fault tree is the pressure boundary failure event. From there, we ask ourselves 5 sets consecutively of the question why in order to drill deeper and further evaluate how that came about. So we may find that the pressure boundary failure occurred as a consequence of there being a valve packing leak, and that the valve packing leak occurred because the valve stem had been corroded. So that would lead us to this failure pathway. So keeping those concepts in mind, we will return back to the slide deck. And so at the bottom of your screen now, you will find a QR code in which you can scan with your phone to download a copy of the fault tree. At the end of our presentation, there will also be our email address for safety system risk at technicalsafetybc.ca should you want a copy and miss the opportunity to download through the QR code. This slide illustrates the main failure pathways that resulted in our ammonia incidents. Only through the mapping exercise were we able to ascertain these frequencies. And we can see that pressure boundary failures at 71% ended up being our most common failure pathway, followed by uncontrolled release through relief valve and intentional opening of the system. You will also see at the very bottom that there is an unknown failure pathway. In these cases, the incident descriptions did not provide us with enough information to determine what the failure pathway was. But looking at pressure boundary failures and the data across the board, we can see that leaks in mechanical seals and joints ended up being our most frequent failure pathway. And these items listed here in the dark blue text are our first whys, so one level deeper to the basic condition. Although leaks in mechanical seals and joints ended up being our most frequent cause of ammonia leaks, we can see that the severity, as indicated by the hue of blue, is lighter, and that means that the severity was not as severe as something such as corrosion and pitting, where we can see these darker blue colors. Taken together, leaks in mechanical seals and joints, corrosion and pitting, along with a number of these, can be attributed to having inadequate preventative maintenance practices or not having frequent enough inspections to detect these changes that could otherwise be prevented. So the concentration of ammonia reported in these incidents varied largely. The range is depicted on the screen. Because of the large range and because of the occurrence of few but very high concentrations, like 20,000 parts per million, we've opted to report the median as a better measure for central tendency. Among our incidents, 15 incidents reported immediately dangerous to life and health concentrations of ammonia, that being above 300 parts per million. And you can see in the table below that between the three failure modes that we spoke of, the uncontrolled release through relief valve ended up having the highest reported median concentration. And that is to be expected because in the relief valve circumstance, another component in the system has failed, thereby the final barrier for the system has needed to activate. So you do want to drop the ammonia very quickly and you want to restore the system to an acceptable pressure boundary. So looking at the injuries and damages or the consequences of these ammonia incidents, we can see that with respect to injuries, 86% of the incidents actually reported no injuries. But where injuries did occur, we see that 12% caused injuries. They range from minor all the way up to fatal. We had 4 fatal reports across 2 different incidents, one in 2017 at a Fernie ice rink where 3 individuals lost their lives, and one in Kamloops in 2022 at a storage and warehousing facility where 1 individual lost their life. So there is definitely very high consequence outcomes related to ammonia exposures. Looking at damages on the other half of this screen, you will see a pie chart, and this shows that 50% of the incidents had no damages or very insignificant damages, but the other 50% shows incidents of varying damages between minor to moderate all the way up to major. So some examples of minor failures could include broken valves or leaky gaskets, and major incidents could involve events such as ammonia brine contamination, a ruptured evaporator, or even ammonia fires that can result in a lot of building damage. Looking at the sectors, we've separated our data based on premise type, like Jackie alluded to earlier, and we found that almost 60% of the data came from recreational facilities. So those are namely ice rinks that belong in recreational cultural buildings and that are situated within schools and universities. Another 40%, and probably what brought you to this session today, occurred in storage and warehousing. And the types of products that were produced varied largely between meat and poultry, dairy, baked goods and foods, fish and seafood, and so on and so forth. We did characterize our third group of other industries. These are higher, kind of heavier industry sectors that had few incidents, but that we also wanted to not miss in characterizing ammonia and why the failures occurred, which is why we've included them here as the third grouping. Looking at the temporal trend of ammonia exposures, we see that across the years along the bottom x-axis, there is a steady decline that can be noted between all the light blue, which depicts the total incidence, the dark blue, which depicts recreational facilities, and the green, which depicts storage and warehousing. In the corresponding colors, the dotted lines represent the decline in the incident rate over time. And we can see that there has been a sharper decline for the recreational facilities sector than the storage and warehousing sector. We believe that is at least in part due to the additional efforts that have been put into managing ammonia exposures and preventing them in this industry sector, which is why moving forward, we want to focus equally, if not more, on storage and warehousing. Geographically, we also see some interesting trends. Recreational facilities are ubiquitous among the province because of our love for ice rinks. You do see a higher concentration in the technical safety BC regions, these three highlighted here, which represent Vancouver Island, Lower Mainland North, and Interior BC. On the opposite side, you see that for storage and warehousing, 52% of the incidents actually came from the region that we call Lower Mainland South. And this makes a lot of sense because Lower Mainland South is generally an agricultural hub, and a lot of farming practices take place here. So it would then be expected that these production and manufacturing facilities would situate themselves closer. Looking at the 5-year average incident rate per 10,000 population, and sorry, I'm just trying to move something. And the 5-year average incident rate for storage and warehousing, we see that Interior BC had the greatest, as long as Northern for recreational facilities, while it was greatest in Lower Mainland South for storage and warehousing. Okay. This slide summarizes kind of the key similarities and differences across the three industry sectors. We've again shown hazard, exposure, and consequence down on the left-hand side. And looking at hazard in the first row, we see that all three failure pathways were possible in recreational facilities. And similarly, that was the case in storage and warehousing. However, there were fewer leaks of the variety of mechanical seals and there were more leaks, pardon me, of mechanical seals and joints in Group B as compared to Group A, and fewer valve packing leaks in this grouping. Pressure boundary failures ended up being the only failure pathway that we noted for other industries. Storage and warehousing also hosts direct ammonia systems, and by that means the ammonia is circulated throughout the building, which is why for leak location below it, you can see that it isn't limited to the machinery room, but can also be found leaking into the refrigerated room or to the outdoor environment through the safety relief system. Contrasting to that, we see that recreational facilities generally use indirect closed surface systems, and those are limited to the machinery room, which is why that tends to be the main leak location that is detected in the indoor environment. For exposure, we've already covered the geographical distribution of recreational facilities compared to storage and warehousing. But it is interesting to note that for other industries, because these industries, as I mentioned, were a little bit heavier in nature, they do have larger requirements for space when it comes to land use, which is why we do see it in our less populous regions, such as Interior BC, Vancouver Island, and Northern BC. The exposures for recreational facilities are a little bit unique compared to the other two. This grouping generally had employment sizes that were smaller, so less than 50 people, while these others had more large employers above 250 workers that could be exposed at one time. Unlike the adult healthy working population who is educated on and trained on emergency preparedness and ammonia awareness, the public exposures in recreational facilities ends up being an area that vulnerable populations can be exposed, including young children and possibly even their elderly caregivers. The consequences between Group A and Group B, again, show very similar results, thereby highlighting the need to not only focus ammonia treatment on Group A, but also moving forward on storage and warehousing. This final slide of my section highlights the storage and warehousing failures. You can see, again, the failure pathways along the bottom of your screen. And again, you see this really large number related to mechanical seals and joints, much greater than all the others. So the importance of having preventative maintenance, including inspection frequency, as well as understanding the frequency with which we need to carry out maintenance activities for repair to prevent run-to-failure events, really is a critical thing that we want to pay attention to moving forward. We also know that for intentional opening of the system, a lot of these types of failures can be related to employees or standard operating procedures either not being developed enough or not being updated at a frequency where employees feel confident and empowered to carry out these safely. So I'll now turn it over to Hamid to share some of our critical incidents in ammonia.
Thanks, Annie and Jackie. And if you can advance the slide to the next slide, yeah, there. Thank you. So in the next two slides, I will be going over a couple of incidents that have been reported to Technical Safety BC. Very briefly, just for your information, the incidents that are reported to Technical Safety BC and are investigated, we do have the reports for those also published on our website. So you are more than welcome to take a look at those as well and for more further and deeper details on those. The first incident I just wanted to share with you happened back in 2022. It was basically within an ice making facility in interior BC in Kamloops. What happened? It happened during the decommissioning and disassembly and dismantling of an existing ammonia refrigeration system in this facility, which did occur earlier in the day, like about a couple of years before dismantling process started. The system started to going through the decommissioning process. So some of the equipment were actually detached and then cut off from the main system and left on the side. A few years later, then another crew came in to basically remove these detached equipment from the sites. And this specific pressure vessel, as you can see on the photo over here, they found that the handle on this specific valve being out of the way, and basically they wanted to move it back within the premises of the package itself. At which point the crew member who started turning this valve into the open position had ammonia splashing into their face. The concentration was actually high enough that it got in contact with a source of ignition and set into fire. And unfortunately, this incident resulted in a fatality of the individual who was basically turning the valve in an open position. One thing that we noticed, I was actually personally involved in the investigation of this incident as well. One thing that we noticed is that this pressure vessel had some cut open connections coming right out of this. So on the first glance, one could actually conclude that, okay, well, there is nothing left within this pressure vessel, so it's empty. Whereas not realizing that those open cut connections were connected to an internal coil as opposed to the shell site, which was full of ammonia liquids. The issue was that like this left alone pressure vessel full of ammonia had no warning signs, no nothing. The valve that is solely like everyone is relying on that valve to solely contain ammonia within this pressure vessel was not locked in the closed position, no warning, do not open kind of warning assigned to that. And there were no documentation indicating that this vessel is full of ammonia. No pressure gauge to indicate that there is content within this pressure vessel. So this whole incident could have been prevented had there been some sort of a risk analysis performed during when the whole decommissioning process was initiated. Realizing that if we are filling this pressure vessel with liquid ammonia and leaving it alone for a few years, it's better to put some warning or like have some sort of a documentation available so that like this type of misunderstanding of the vessel being empty do not occur. If we can advance to the next slide. So then the second incident I would like to share with you happened a year earlier than the previous one. So in 2021, this incident happens in the food processing facility and to an auto purger that was installed in this food processing facility back in 2021. Although it may sound that only 6.7 pounds of ammonia was leaked out of this incident, but it was like the consequences of this was resulting in injuries, multiple injuries. And one of the worker had some chemical burns into their head, ear, neck, and upper chest, and also the refrigeration contractor who was there within the vicinity of this equipment got some of the liquid ammonia splashed on them as well, and having received some burns as well. What happened was that this auto purger, which is the one of the components to remove non-condensables from the systems, was in operation well beyond its expected life, being 20 years. It was in operation for more than 30, 35 years. And even worse, that it was in operation without having proper maintenance done on this equipment. One example is that one of the more important switches, like the on-off auto switch, that you could employ or engage in order to turn or shut the system down in case of an emergency, was missing the knob. You could not even indicate what position it was left at. And even if you knew where it was and you wanted to turn it into off position in case of the emergency, you needed a pair of pliers because it was missing the knob. So that very important piece was missing the knob for a long time without anyone paying attention to it and then trying to maintain it. The poor maintenance did not even stop there. Since it was in operation for quite a long time after we opened up the system and have a further investigation of the internal parts, we realized that like many parts within the system was actually either worn out or like had some damaged internal parts in it. The metering device or expansion valve had the needle completely worn out within that system. So a series of poor maintenance and the strategy of run to failure resulted in this consequence in this issue that's ammonia, liquid ammonia, then got released into the bubbler it's filled with water in order to absorb the potential ammonia leaking out of the system. And the bubbler itself was also missing the cap at the top. So once liquid ammonia got introduced into water, it basically got into a really violent action, and the contaminated in water with ammonia, this worker, operator, and also the contractor who was setting aside, and resulted in burns and injuries. As you can see, like this could have also been really prevented by having a well thought of maintenance and operation program, and even more importantly, follow the recommendations of such maintenance programs. Sometimes we may only come up with a maintenance program for a binder on the shelf, but more importantly is to follow the risks that have been identified within those maintenance programs. I'll pass it back to Jackie.
Great, thank you, Hamid. So that wraps up our section around the risk analysis. And as I mentioned, the risk analysis result has really been the basis that shapes what we want to do next about this risk. So from a risk management process, we are going into the risk treatment planning stage right now. We are in the middle of risk treatment planning and trying to reach out to different stakeholders from these different sectors to run these ideas by the stakeholders to not just sanity check, but also have an opportunity for everyone to help shape these actions together. So from the risk analysis, we found that as Hamid has mentioned last, we found that a lot of the incidents could have been prevented by having better regular maintenance, more timely replacement of aged equipment, but also more timely and regular testing and servicing of the equipment, and having more developed SOPs for different maintenance and servicing tasks So some of the most critical incidents could have been prevented with a more solid maintenance and program. So that is why one of the focus areas for our risk treatment is really on promoting regular maintenance as opposed to a culture of running to failure of our equipment. We really want to promote something a bit more proactive and regular. And then the second area that we have identified is really to protect the integrity of our safety features. Even though the data analysis has really shown that it is not that common that we have incidents related to leak from the relief valve, we do think that it is one of those situations where it's low probability but high consequence situation, as it really represents a failure of our last line of defense, but also because by design, the relief valve is meant to release a high amount of ammonia in a short period of time. So if there are failures around that, that could be a very severe incident. And we found that these type of incidents tends to be associated with manual override of safety features. So we also want to develop actions to really promote this kind of practice that could protect the integrity of safety features and avoid manual override. And lastly, as Annie have shown in the distribution of incidents, we find that a lot of the incidents are at the recreational facilities. So in the past few years, we have been working closely with the recreational facilities sector to manage this risk. However, quite a significant portion of the incidents are in the sectors with storage and warehousing type of buildings. So we also want to work with the sector, a lot of folks on this webinar today to see how we can tackle this risk together. So I want to walk us through a few initial ideas that TSBC wants to implement and get your feedback on. And we want to, since there are so many participants on this webinar, our best way to get your input is through a Zoom poll question. So before we go into those risk treatment idea, we can have a warm-up question on what is your role in your organization. So feel free to just take a few seconds to indicate what is your role in your organization. This gives us a good sense of the distribution of participants at the webinar today, who's joining and who's providing input. Great. So we have a nice spread across different roles with the highest participation from health and safety professional, which makes a lot of sense given that this is a safety alliance. So thank you so much for taking time for joining this initial warm-up question for us. So the first risk treatment idea that we want to implement at TSBC is a new education program for owners and managers of ammonia refrigeration systems. The main reason or objective really is to help owners and managers proactively plan and budget for repairs and maintenance, really to minimize the leaks and also to prevent operational delays and reduce the risk to workers and the public. And how this looks like, it could be a short e-learning program hosted by TSBC to provide owners and managers with basically a one-stop shop to see what is their legal responsibilities in maintaining the refrigeration system, also when and how to involve TSBC, and lastly, the most important part also, what kind of repairs and maintenance are required for that unit at what frequency. So it can all be there in one place to help the owner and manager plan and budget for these repairs and maintenance. So we have one at our next poll question is really about your facilities preventative maintenance program. What does your facilities preventative maintenance program include? And feel free to select everything that applies to your program. And there is also an option for I'm not sure, or there isn't a structured maintenance program. Great. So we have quite a good spread here and showing that many of the programs do include a lot of these key components. And with the highest one looking like the top three here is the periodic inspections. What are those? And logbook for maintenance activities and SOPs for the maintenance tasks. So I'll stop sharing here. So thank you for that. And then the next risk treatment option or idea that we have is also related to maintenance. So this is really a requirement for all ammonia refrigeration units facilities to have to develop a site-specific preventative maintenance program. And it looks like many already have a maintenance program. And the key difference here is really the site-specific nature of it. So this could be a requirement for all these facilities to have a maintenance program on site that would include things like checklists of all the required inspections and tests at what interval they need to be done, a logbook of all the maintenance, SOPs on how to conduct those maintenance or service tasks, as well as a inventory of all the equipment so that it's easy to see what equipment requires maintenance at what interval. We realize that it is definitely not something that can be done overnight. It could be a very big lift for some facilities. So we do hope to work with the industry to see what kind of support TSBC can provide. And some of the initial thoughts is also that this requirement can be a phase we can phase in this requirement. It doesn't have to happen right away. And also we can provide different tools and resources to help different facilities develop that program. And you can also partner with your local safety officer in developing that program. So it can be a very gradual process. It's something that we really want to work with you on to develop and make it a bit more tailored for your facilities. a lot of the required testing and inspections are actually all written in the code already, but often they are kind of everywhere in the code, and it could be quite difficult to sometimes think of how it applies to your specific refrigeration system. So this is also one way to kind of help you translate that into your facilities and make it easy and translate it into the SOPs so that it can be applied regularly and correctly at your specific unit. So the next poll question we have is really about the barriers of doing regular preventative maintenance. So which of the following are barriers to performing regular preventative maintenance? And please feel free to select all that apply. Great. So thank you so much for all those participated. This is very helpful, and not surprisingly, we have multiple barriers to preventative maintenance, and this is actually quite a similar set of results as we have seen from the recreational facilities as well. And of course, inadequate budget is often the top one that comes up. So thank you very much for participating in that one. And then the last idea that we have is a communication campaign on tips to avoid safety overrides. As I've mentioned, even though it's uncommon for ammonia leak incidents to happen with the relief valve, it is one of those situations that could potentially be very severe, and it really shouldn't happen given that the safety feature is there as a line of defense. We really want to raise awareness around how to actually avoid even getting to the point where we need to manually override a safety feature. So early warning signs such as nuisance tripping of the system, maybe the alarm keep going off, and then also raising awareness around the potential severity of running your unit while having a safety feature inactive. So that is the last piece here, and that brings us to the last poll question. Which of the following situation do you think commonly lead to overriding a safety feature on ammonia refrigeration system? Great. So It looks like the repeated tripping of safety seems to be one of the most common ones. And I am very curious to see what the others are. So I encourage those folks who has put in others to reach out to let us know what that is, so that we can really put that on our radar. So this really brings us to the last piece. Because there are so many participants here today, we don't have a chance to have any interaction or conversation or discussions about risk in general. So I really want to ask folks to sign up, provide us with your contact information to participate in smaller group engagement that we want to be hosting going forward with industry holders. These will be opportunities where you can really provide your input to help us shape those risk treatment actions, not just what they are, but also how we implement them. It would make more sense for your facilities or your sectors. So please feel free to join us in these sessions. The QR code is here. I'll leave it on for a few more seconds. The slides will be shared with everyone as well. So if you want to sign up later on, you decide you want to join, please feel free to use that QR code. It will still be valid. And then I will end this here, and I just want to put our email addresses here. If you have any questions or specific input you want to just email us directly to provide us with, we very much would appreciate hearing from you.